Good evening, everybody. Potato chip, potato chip. My name is Erin McCole Cupp. I'm the author of the Jane E Friendless Orphan series, and I am here to welcome you to Sabbath Rest Book Talk, a monthly webcam series where we talk about the value of fiction, where fiction is good for you. This month's topic is really interesting. It's and not interesting in the gross way, actually interesting in grossing. We're talking about obedience, which is a virtue I think that has become much maligned in our culture. Usually the word obedience is sort of prefaced with the word blind, meaning if you have the virtue of obedience, it's because you're stupid or you don't know any better or what have you. So our three books this evening are really good examples of showing the virtue of obedience at its heart, at its goodness, and how it does challenge us to rise above just blindness and blind following and into thoughtfulness and trust. I am joined this evening by our hosts from literally around the globe. We have Corinna Turner joining us this evening, the author of the I Am Margaret series, and Elfling. Corinna, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what time it is there?
Okay, I'm Corinna Turner. I'm a British author. I write fiction. I'm not very well prepared. Here's one. This is I Am Margaret. And I'm in the UK, and it is it's just gone midnight, so it's Monday morning.
So that's dedication, folks. Before we leave, Corinna, make sure I don't sign us off without talking about you. You've got a book coming out.
Yes.
Right? All right. So we want to make sure we hit that before this evening. I also have a book that's supposed to be released very shortly, and I'll have details about that. And the other person joining us this evening is Carolyn Astfalk, one of the contributors to, well, Corinna is also a contributor to the Secrets anthology, but Carolyn, too many C's tonight, is coming to us from far from home. Carolyn, why don't you say hi to everybody tonight?
Yes, hello. Yeah, I'm traveling with my family, and so you get me live from my minivan in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania tonight. So,
that's fantastic. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just say I actually am from Hershey, Pennsylvania, and I write contemporary Catholic romances, but I have unfortunately nothing coming out right now.
But you're hard at work on your next. I do know that.
I am, finally. Okay. Yes.
And I'm coming from my aunt's back deck because everybody pray for my Uncle Jack. He recently passed away. Wonderful man, great example of faithful living. So we're having sort of a reverse wake, and it's much more calm than the wakes I would go to as an Irish girl, an Irish American girl. It's more relaxed, and so I actually get to hang out here and still have my book review, talk with you guys. So before we go any further, we have not one but two giveaways going on this evening. So if you comment live on this video, and honestly, with the death in the family, I haven't really been very good about letting everybody know that this video is coming up. So if we don't get any comments before the night is out, then we'll extend it to October 30th or 31st. Comment on this video, and you will be entered for a chance to win a copy of The King's Prey by Susan Peake, which we're discussing tonight. And the other book we're discussing tonight is Intermission by Serena Chase. She's also offered a copy of that book. Both are paperback copies. Both are to U.S. addresses only. If you comment and you don't have a U.S. address and your name is chosen, we'll see if we can work something out with an ebook. That might be touch and go, but we'll give it a try anyway because, hey, that's fair. All right, so tonight's virtue is obedience. And you know what? We had a couple minutes and I forgot to ask, what book should we talk about first? We're talking about Intermission by Serena Chase. We're talking about King's Prey by Susan Peake, which is a story of Saint Dymphna, the patron saint of people with mental health issues. And we're also talking about Enchanted by Gail, Carson, Levine. So what should we talk about first? Should we talk about the most famous one, which is frankly Enchanted?
That's good for me.
Okay, so we've got one vote. Let's go for Enchanted. So Who wants to give us, since Carolyn and I are both traveling right now, Corinna, by any chance, do you happen to have a copy of?
I have mine too.
Oh, you have you're so prepared. Mine are only like 45 minutes away and I just left them.
No, my daughter's reading it. So like when we're in the car, she's got her nose buried in it.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So what is your daughter thinking of it so far?
She loves it.
Okay.
She's like halfway through. She said, "Is this a Cinderella story?" I said, "Yes, it is." So she's a bright child, but I'm not sure if she absorbed all of it yet.
Which, in case you are unaware, in the event you've been living under a rock, Ella Enchanted is yet another interpretation of the Cinderella story. However, the twist on it is that Ella, whom we would know as Cinderella, she has been cursed from her christening by a fairy whose name is escaping me.
Lucinda.
Okay, thank you, Priscilla. Who with the virtue of obedience, she will always obey. So you can ask her to do something and she will say no. But if you tell her to do something, she must obey. So that has all sorts of interesting implications, especially with her father's, like her relationship with her father is, he's a train, not a train wreck. He's a quiet train wreck. Yeah, and who wants to talk about Ella's father and Ella's situation?
I'll jump in. Okay, so Ella's father, he's away on business. He's kind of a, he's a, what I want to say, he's at markets selling, trading various things, and he seems like he's kind of shifty, maybe in his dealings, I guess would be a way to say it. So he's absent largely. And when he is there, his interaction with Ella is mainly how he can twist it for his benefit and come into more money, or how he can work her situation to his advantage. So luckily she's surrounded by another fairy, Mandy, who knows of this this order she has, this to be obedient, and she respects Ella, does not use that against her. But others who don't know, unaware, may say things that are difficult, awkward, or fine. But in any case, good or bad, she has no choice but to obey. If she doesn't obey, she actually physically has a reaction to it.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting way to show how it almost felt like an addiction to obedience had been forced upon her, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that does. She almost has like withdrawal if she doesn't obey. So she doesn't have, she's lost her free will in cases where she's had to obey, whether it's good to obey or bad to obey, it doesn't matter. Ella has to obey, which, as you can imagine, causes all kinds of difficulties for her.
Right. Corinna, what were some of your takes on how the virtue of obedience played out in this particular story?
Yeah, I just went and watched the film today, having read the book. So now I've got the two confused in my head.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't very smart. But I think it does. I think it highlights the importance. It really highlights the importance of free will when people give her orders and she just has to do it. Which comes out more in the film, but we're not supposed to be talking about the film. Oh,
That's okay. You're allowed to.
I'm going to give spoilers for the film. So, yeah, I think.
I think if you don't mind me jumping in, what it always makes me think of in regard to free will, I've heard people say, if you can't say no, what does your yes mean? So it's she's obedient, but so what? She's not being virtuous. She has no choice.
Yeah. It's not a virtue in Ella's case.
Yeah.
Right. And I like the twist on it towards, I don't think this is a huge spoiler, that as the story progresses and her situation gets more difficult, she meets the fairy who put this curse on her, and she asks to have the curse lifted. And instead, the fairy makes it more intense in that she tells her, oh, just obey obediently. Or not obey happily. Thank you. I was saying the word gets stuck in my head. Obey happily. And how that she's feeling happy but not really feeling happy, and how much that like is sort of an image of how like twisted obedience can play out. That we think we're happy, but deep down inside we know we're not.
She turns into a puppet.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to like to ask, like, I don't want to spoil the ending completely, because if I remember correctly, I saw the movie first, but it was probably 10 years ago. And probably while I was like nursing babies or something like that. So my memory is admittedly spotty. I don't think it ends quite like the book does. So the book is more fresh in my mind. The ending of Ella Enchanted, the book, had me feeling kind of like, I'm not quite sure I bought it. Am I the only one? Am I being overly picky?
My first thought was, well, I kind of got cheated because it was just resolved. But after I thought of it, I thought, well, it's kind of a Wizard of Oz ending, and I'm not dissatisfied with the Wizard of Oz. I'm not sure. Okay. Maybe it didn't have the same depth as that. But my first reaction was, yeah, I don't quite buy it. But after I was thinking about that, I thought, well, maybe I'm just being hard on it. I don't know.
Okay,
I think actually the way they do it in the film, and of course they've changed the plot, it's more credible that she manages to do what she does at that moment.
Okay.
In the film, because the stakes are so much higher. In the book, it's just this imagined future that could go bad, that her obedience might cause serious problems. Whereas in the film, I don't know if you remember, it's like a life or death situation for someone she really loves. So I don't want to give spoilers, but it's more credible that yeah, I don't even want to.
Yeah, it's so hard because like so much hinged on that end.
It's like the spoilers are just like bouncing around in my head, but it's more credible that it would happen. It would work in the film. But I like the fact that it comes down to her, and that at the end of the day, free will wins. You know.
You know, this happens every month when we do this. When like hearing Carolyn talk about it as well, and I agree. Like the stakes, you know, didn't seem that high as they were in the movie, which Corinna, you remember, and I admittedly don't. I may have been asleep by the end at that point in my life. I wonder if, like, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I buy it a little more because she wanted to break that curse for herself the whole time. And in the end, the curse, spoiling things.
This is my problem.
End, right. Okay. Sorry, folks. In the end, the resolution came about because she stopped caring so much about herself and was caring about somebody else. There you go. So maybe, like, if I think about that, I wonder if I have to go back and reread it. Is that like, Carolyn? Do you think maybe that sort of plays into what you're saying, like the Wizard of Oz ending?
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely more of a self-sacrificial act of her will, and I took that as that was what really freed her. Yeah,
that was what I really liked about the ending in the book, is that it's in a way, because it's the stakes are it's less all big and dramatic, but she manages it because it's for someone else. I really like that about it.
Yeah, now that I think about that, I agree. Okay, yeah, that feels more satisfying now that we see, everybody see the value of talking about books with people. It's a good thing. So let's talk next about, can we talk about I want to talk about King's Prey next. King's Prey is the story of Saint Dymphna, who, if you're not familiar with it, this is in a series of YA fiction by Susie Peake called God's Forgotten Friends. And
can I just say something?
Yes. I
read the book without knowing anything about the saint, and I didn't read anything about the saint before opening the book. I deliberately thought, I don't know anything about this saint, I'm just going to read the book. So I didn't know, as I read, whether she was a confessor or a martyr or a hermit or whatever. And that was very effective. So I'd just say, don't give away what type of saint she is.
Oh, okay. All right. Darn it. Because I knew about Saint Dymphna's story before, because I was just about to say the series is called God's Forgotten Friends. And I was about to say, well, everybody knows about Saint Dymphna.
No, I didn't. Read the book. It's way more suspenseful if you don't know. It's anxious.
Okay, can somebody else then give this plot summary? Because if I say it, I'm going to mess it up.
Okay, I'll try.
Okay, Corinna, take it away.
Okay, so there's the Princess Dymphna. Her father's an Irish king, way back. Can't remember the exact century. And she's got. Now, I read this book maybe a year ago, so I may have forgotten the finer details. But then there's two brothers, and when their parents both die, and the older brother eventually has to leave the younger brother at a monastery because he just can't feed his little brother, and the only way he can get him to stay in the monastery is to tell him that he doesn't want to look after him anymore. He doesn't love him anymore, which like breaks the younger brother's heart. Then the older brother, called Turlo, goes off to become a soldier in the king's army, and the younger brother, Brioc, isn't it, becomes a minstrel. And gets married, and but they remain estranged even though they're living nearly close together. Meanwhile, Princess Dymphna has grown up. She's friends with Brioc, isn't she? Yeah. And yes. But her father is going insane. Her mother's dead. She looks very like her mother, and her father decides he's going to marry her, which is obviously a problem. So she runs.
Not obvious for King Damon, of course, but
well, no, because he's mad, poor man.
Yeah.
But, he's also pagan. So there's another complication. She's Christian. He's pagan. She runs away with the priest to escape from him. And I don't want to give too many spoilers, but Brioc goes with them, and then Turlo ends up chasing after them, but he wants to help, but they don't know that, and there's all sorts of terrible misunderstandings, and it's all quite painful. There's a very nice wolfhound called Sam as well. And I can't say much more. They flee towards France, don't they? France? Brittany? Belgium. And I can't give away any more, but yeah, I sort of practically read it in one sitting because I just had to know what happened at the end. Because I didn't know what sort of saint she was, and I didn't know what the two brothers. I really, really wanted to know what happened between the two brothers. I know that's not our topic, but anyway, yeah.
Well, no, it actually kind of is our topic, because Brioc had to obey his older brother because that was the only remaining source of authority in his very young life, because the two had been orphaned, and so he had to obey his brother, and the only way that Turlo could get Brioc to obey him was by, like you said, telling him that saying that he didn't love him. And how much, wow, that really saying that messed up their relationship is kind of an understatement, because they were like, wow, there was all sorts of drama between them, and it affected, obviously they grow up, Brioc gets married, and his wife, Linny, they called her. I'm not going to butcher her actual full Irish name because, yeah, anyway, I am of Irish descent, but not of Irish pronunciation. So it was pretty heartrending to see how much, oh golly, I mean, you feel bad for Turlock because he wanted to do the right thing and he thought a lie was the way to have that happen, and how much a mess that made. Carolyn, you've been quiet. Chime in.
I've got a little.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, it's just what you were saying at the beginning, Erin. Just made me think. I don't know if it's what you were getting at, but if Brioc had obeyed when his brother told him you have to stay in this monastery, then Turlo wouldn't have had to lie, or felt he had to lie, and all the troubles between them wouldn't have happened. He could have lived in the monastery. Turlo could have visited him. And so that just popped into my head with what you said. I don't know if what you were getting at, but
it was what I was getting at, actually. And I got sidetracked because of how it did play out, how the lie, however well-meaning, still had the implications that a lie has, still had the same consequences. And, wow, yeah, things would have been very different if Brioc, well, actually, things would have been different, I think, if Turlock had seen his own smallness and weakness and had also gone to the monastery to ask for help. Because, I mean, he thought of himself as the grown-up, but he really wasn't at the time. Carolyn, chime in. Tell us what your thought.
when I was kind of mentally reviewing the book, because it's been a while since I'd read it too, I was real focused on Dymphna obviously not being able to be obedient to her father. I really wasn't thinking until you started talking about the brothers again that, oh, there was this whole thing where, Sherlock he had to be obedient to the king, right? He's a king's soldier. But yet, he wants to assist in helping preserve Dymphna and escaping. And there's conflicts of obedience at that level too, as far as, they have authority. Dymphna's authority is, both to her father, and she has authority as a Christian to recognize God's authority. And then there's this military element, and there's other obligations that kind of keep them all struggling to determine which authority it takes precedence over the other.
Yeah, there were a lot of things in like situations illustrating the importance of understanding right authority.
Even the dog doesn't know which brother to obey.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. I hadn't even thought about that until you brought that up. And there's like Karina was saying, there's a lot that we could spoil, and we really shouldn't assume you know the story. But the other layer of complication was Sherlock was one of the king's soldiers originally, was he not?
Yeah.
So he also whom should he obey? And then of course, obeying God, or at least natural law, that, the competition for the affection of the future, aka marital affection, should not be within the, the family unit. I don't care who's died. You know what I mean? So that dealt with a lot of whom do you obey when you have a parent making destructive, sinful requests. And there was a lot of that in there. And it's interesting that itself is what fed into us now having a saint specific to mental health needs. How much the family roots and unhealthy parental requests just can crush mental health, but also how much children who have those unhealthy demands made of them, but then, dig deep and hold on to those graces to make better choices than are asked of them, and how they can in turn lead others, and we can hope even their parents, to the right path. Okay, somebody else talk.
I think that's a great segue into the third book.
Oh my goodness, that is. Oh, by the way, if everybody who's watching, let me just really quickly. Again, we've got giveaways of The King's Prey, hard copy to a U.S. address, and of Intermission by Serena Chase. Comment below. Also, like and subscribe so you can get information about when we have a new video available, find out about more books, read along with us, chat along with us. So there you go. So let's talk about Intermission by Serena Chase. I think I can give a little summary of this. So Madeline Faith is the name of a teenager. She's a sophomore in high school, and she comes from a family of all jocks. And now that I say that out loud, I hope that's not some sort of insulting phrase in the UK, because if it is, I apologize, Corinna. That was not my intent. It's just what we call them here. I'm curious, is that like a rude word to say?
No, it's not rude. I mean, one can feel slightly vague about what it means.
What does that mean? It's like a sporty
stuff, you see. Like a sporty high school person, is it?
Yeah, it's a sporty. Well, sporty in general, I think. And you can be out of school and still be considered a jock, although it's less of a thing. Okay. Then you're just like, I don't know, like arthritic and in the soccer club or something like that. I don't know. Not something I can relate to, frankly. Anyway, so Madeline Faith is, growing up, her parents were, very sporty. Her older siblings are very sporty. And her mom is a piece of work, man. Madeline Faith, and throughout most of the book, she's called Faith. she, is really drawn to musical theater. She's got a beautiful singing voice, but her parents are constantly putting down her interest in theater. They're constantly, like they made her quit ballet because I think she didn't get A's one semester or something like that. So they're really like, whatever support they give her is very grudging. If she chooses to go to college, then let's not choose, like you have to go to college, but you're going to have to choose a major that's going to make you money or we're not paying. And we've already paid for your brother to go to med school and your sister is, pre-law. So yeah, it's a mess. And of course she meets this boy who is really not a boy. No, he's not a boy. He's 19, so legally a man. So throughout the book, there's all sorts of tension between their age difference. He is a Christian. He's home. Well, he's back in the States. He grew up as a missionary kid. And it's not your typical missionary kid, but now I'm going to live life here in America and just do what I want. No, he actually took to heart the lessons that his parents taught him. So he starts wanting to date Faith, but as soon as he realizes that she's so much younger than he is the one who very honorably, puts the brakes on their relationship. And they remain friends, and her family eventually finds out that they have something going on, and her mother does not believe either of them could ever possibly be virtuous. And that, the obedience fulcrum in there is what holds so much of the tension of that story. And again, I don't want to spoil much because it was a pretty powerful story, I think. Serena Chase does give a warning with this book that it is really for nobody younger than 14 because there are some issues in there there's nothing graphic, but there is some pretty intense scenes of, there's really no other way to say it, of abuse in there that's, again, not graphic, but enough to be pretty disturbing. So parents, keep that in mind before you pass it on to even your 14-year-old, give it some thought and some prayer. All right, so I think that's the best summary I can come up with for Intermission. Who wants to talk about how obedience played out in this book? Again, let's try not to give spoilers.
Well, I think the obedience is very much tied to Noah and his Christian beliefs. Because if I remember correctly, Faith really doesn't have much faith. I think she had some education, but it was kind of a lukewarm.
Yeah, they weren't even Creaster. They weren't even a Creaster family. They were just Christmas, going to church on Christmas. Right. And even then they were looking for excuses to not. Yeah.
So it's really, she's obviously struggling with being obedient to her mother. But she's also learning about obedience because of Noah's example and how he is obedient to higher law, to what he believes as a Christian, what's morally right, and he respects her mother as an authority, whether she's right or wrong.
Which is huge. Like nobody does that in our culture.
Yeah. Yeah, he's really an upstanding guy. And so without giving anything away, you see that towards the end, as she's forced to, I guess you'd say, be obedient to their choices and live with, all the decisions they've made and what her mother has inflicted, she comes to recognize in herself that she has learned obedience to God by recognizing his will and being patient and, accepting that Noah is obedient too. So it's one of my favorite books just ever. It's so moving. I remember sitting and reading it during my daughter's ballet class, and I don't really cry easily at books, but I'm like trying to wipe away tears. So.
Yeah, I agree. That's up there with Opal's Jubilee by Leslie Litch and The Grace Crasher by Mara Farrow. I think these are my top 3 indie books. Period.
I would, I'll probably say the same ones. Those are also 2 of my favorites. Yeah.
Yeah. Corinna, what did you think? I'm getting the signal from my family that I've got to leave shortly. So sorry. So Corinna, give us some thoughts on Intermission.
Yeah, I'm not normally sort of big on books that are all about the theatre, but I actually really enjoyed this one. It was you know, couldn't put it down, sort of. I thought what was quite interesting was that if the mother's character had been different, just slightly different, then kind of what she was asking Faith would have been more reasonable because of the situation being what it was, and the mother's concerns about the relationship were actually kind of understandable. But it was because of the way she was about everything. She didn't respect Faith's interests or her wishes, or she wouldn't believe her, she didn't trust her. Because of all these other things, it became unreasonable. But the actual concern at the heart of it was like one that a lot of parents would probably understand. You know, this guy is so much older, and what's he want? But she just wouldn't believe, she wouldn't trust, she wouldn't. Yeah.
And as a parent, how much, at what point do we let go and actually trust? Because I mean, I keep saying it's not, as a parent, it's not my job to trust my kids. It's my job to teach them how to be trustworthy.
Yeah.
So it's a delicate balance, but I mean, I don't think you can walk that balance without having some kind of faith that somebody else is in, somebody more powerful than us is in control. And her mom didn't have that. Right. I think that made it, you know, so impossible for her to imagine virtue, even to let go and act like it existed, you know?
Yeah. I found Noah very impressive. I mean, he definitely like made one think about obedience, but I actually found Faith sometimes made me sort of think, whoa, you know, in that situation, I think I would have said something dreadful. I don't think I would have just taken that from my mum, you know. Fortunately, my mum's not like that. But so I was actually reading it. I was feeling a bit ashamed of myself. I was thinking, you know, I'd probably have said something that I probably shouldn't have said, but she doesn't. But on the other hand, maybe she should have done, because she's kind of being abused, and it's like, so she probably shouldn't have. So yeah, I found it quite interesting, like what she actually should have done, like.
Yeah, what was the right thing to do in that situation? And she had to walk some seriously fine lines. And as soon as she could, oh, I'm going to spoil things. Never mind. What I do want to say is the one thing that I found very satisfying at the end is it could have been wrapped up with a neat little bow, the relationship with her mother, and it wasn't. Like there was some resolution, but it wasn't magically perfect.
It was quite realistic, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Because I was like expecting, like, all right, this is going to fall apart right here at this moment, and it didn't. It didn't. Yeah. And I was, as a writer, I was like, all right, there you go. I'm happy with that. All right, we are kind of running out of time. If you haven't already, comment live for your chance. I know we have one viewer. I admit in humility. Comment live for your chance to win The King's Prey by Susan Peake, or Serena Chase's Intermission, U.S. address only. If you are not a U.S. address, let us know anyway. And you know what, at this point, we do need to wrap it up. Comment even if you're not watching live, and we'll do the drawing on October 30th, or comment before October 31st. There you go. Corinna has a new book coming out. Corinna, why don't you tell us about that really quickly, because we are running out of time.
Okay, it should be out at the beginning of Advent. It's called The Siege of Reginald Hill, and it's an Iron Market book. It's a bit of a spin-off. It's about Kyle, and it's set after the rest of the series, when Kyle is his father Kyle, he's working in Africa, and he gets kidnapped from his church one night by armed men working for Reginald Hill, who's the bad guy, and basically, Reginald Hill just wants to get back at Margot the only way he can, basically by killing Kyle, preferably as horribly as possible. And
in true Corinna Turner style.
Yeah, but Kyle has a different idea about this, and he thinks that Reginald Hill ought to repent and everything and be saved. So yeah, it's kind of like Kyle versus Reginald Hill. Yeah.
All right, good. It's a good conflict. I have something far less conflicting coming out. Hopefully, it was supposed to be out today, hopefully within the next few days. Get moving with St. Dominic's 9 Ways of Prayer. It's a little booklet. It's going to be available for 99 cents, but if you want it free, go to erinmccolecupp.com and sign up for my newsletter, and you will get that free as soon as it is available, which should be within the week. Thank you to good old Sabbath Rest Book Talk former host Rebecca Willen for editing it. And I think that's it for Sabbath Rest Book Talk for this month. Next month, we are talking Memento Mori. And if all works out well, we're going to have Sister Teresa Alethea Noble, the nun with a skull on her desk, joining us for the tail end of that video. Thanks to Carolyn and Corinna for joining us this evening. I'm Erin McCole Cupp, and make sure you comment by October 31st, and you could be a winner. Thanks. God bless everybody. Bye-bye.